Oh, Grace, it looks like we do have Fernando. So in when we start off, if you want to just prompt Fernando to introduce himself, he's our new team member, so he can
Oh, okay.
introduce.
Yeah.
All right, we'll start in a minute. I think we're getting a lot of people in now, so.
Yeah, I'm here just setting up my headphones.
Good to hear, Fernando. All right, I'm going to share my screen. Okay, Grace, I'll let you take it from here.
Yeah, I just want to say hello, everyone. Thanks for taking the time for joining us here tonight for our June meeting. We'll be mostly talking a lot about the phase review, going over our phase 2 engagement with you, and then talking a little bit about the industrial area. We wanted to celebrate, you can go ahead and advance thanks, our first anniversary. So you guys have officially been involved for 1 year in this process. So we really want to thank you for your time. I know we have some new members with us, but we really appreciate your commitment to this process and just wanted to celebrate that. So a little bit about what we're going to talk about tonight. So we're going to go over what we've done in phase 2 engagement and kind of share the numbers and what has happened. And then we're going to kind of get at the end of that, we'll get some of your input on it, and we'll also kind of summarize what we've heard in that process. And then we'll take a little 5-minute break. And then for the second half of the meeting, we're going to focus on a conversation around the Sunnyside industrial area. And so we'll kind of be giving you a background on what we've heard in that, and then kind of getting some of your feedback on that. And then at the end of the meeting, just talking about next steps. For most of you guys, you have seen this quite a few times by now, but yeah, if you can have the bandwidth, turn on your video if possible. If you can mute if you're not speaking. If you have any technical questions, who should that be tonight? I think you
Sorry,
might have Edson. There we go.
Yeah.
Edson will answer any technical questions. And then, so yeah, if we have any members of the public, I don't think we maybe do at this point, but if any members of the public are attending, just that the conversation will primarily be with steering committee members, but feel free to type something in the chat if you have any questions. And then I think, you guys know this, and this hasn't been an issue at all, but if you are disagreeing, be respectful and focus on the idea and not the person, and use the hand raise function. Yeah, and we already talked about video. So here we are in the process. We're about to kind of we're right now working on developing the draft of recommendations. And eventually we'll kind of work on reviewing those with you guys here in the near future. And then before I hand it off here to Brad, we wanted to introduce, we have a new staff member over with the city, Fernando, and we want to just give him the opportunity to introduce himself.
Hi, everybody. My name is Fernando Booth. I just joined the city recently, and some of you might know me from other projects along the area, but I recently joined community planning and development, and I'm excited to join this process with you guys.
So yeah, a bittersweet moment here. So we welcome Fernando, but this will likely be Edson's last steering committee meeting. He was promoted a while back, but he was nice enough to kind of stick with us till we found a permanent replacement for Edson, which is Fernando. But Edson got promoted a couple months ago as a senior city planner, and will be focusing on cool rezoning affordable housing kind of projects. So Edson, do you want to say something or?
I just want to say thank you. It's been a pleasure getting to meet all of you. Like Sung said, my focus now is going to be affordable housing rezonings throughout Denver, and how to kind of get projects approved faster. And so I'm working with a team with different departments to try to get those faster. And so that's going to be my primary role. And I'll probably be in the shadows of this plan, but you won't pretty much see me. But it's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much, Edson, for everything that you've done. And so Brad Siegel from the consulting team is gonna kind of recap what we've done for phase 2 engagement, kind of by the numbers. Thanks, Brad.
Great. Thanks, Grace. Good evening, everyone. I saw the councilwoman was in the chat and is now off screen, but I was curious if Councilwoman Sandoval wanted to say something special there before we head on.
Just wanted to say thanks to Edson. And then one thing, when we're not having to screen share, can we turn it off? Because unless you have 2 monitors, a lot of times people can't see, like if you're on an iPad, all you see is the, and if one of our rules is to have our screens on, we should honor that if we're not screen sharing. Just a thought, Brad. Thank you. But wanted to say thank you, Edson, and your new role is so important for like the implementation of this process, right? So this process would have recommendations and you'll be the one implementing them. So congrats.
Yeah, absolutely. This is the first project we've had a pleasure to work with Edson on, and he's just been a fantastic team member from our side. So thank goodness you're staying at the city. So that's all I can say. So tonight I'm going to talk a bit about phase 2 engagement, and you're all going to get a very voluminous report that goes into the details of what we've been up to over the last 6-7 months. A lot of new things were tried this go around in this phase of engagement that have not been utilized in other NPIs, in other neighborhood planning efforts. Part of that was we're still dealing with COVID, so we had this mix of remote and on-site meetings. We had a lot of meetings, and then also we had incredible participation actually from the council office. So the notion of going door to door with flyers to every house, I believe, in the district. Naomi, you probably know more about this than I do, but you guys, I think, distributed more than 5,000 flyers. Is that correct? Door to door? Yeah, give or take. So yeah, fantastic. So we have never had that kind of participation from a council partner in this type of planning before. So kudos to you guys on that. And then also working with Puma, working with us, we have a subcontractor called Colorado Changemaker Collective. You've heard us call them CCC. And they deployed the Promotora model for the first time in one of these planning efforts. So we had 5 Promotoras who are neighborhood liaisons who were bilingual. And we were fairly strategic in terms of how they were deployed. We deployed them in a couple areas strategically. One was businesses that are frequented by a variety of neighborhood residents. And then also, secondly, we looked at mapping and demographics within the neighborhood and deployed them into areas that have a lot of renters in terms of rental residential, because our experience finds that homeowners are more attracted to this process than renters, so we really try to reach them. So when we go through the numbers tell half the story. I mean, the numbers are again sort of part of the story, and then of course it's the content that we really prize and the substance of what we're getting. Trupti asked how many unique or how many folks have participated in this to date. I believe in phase 2, I mean, these are all unique numbers at the top. So probably what, about 700-800 in this phase. And I think more than that in the first phase, Sung, if I recall right. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, I think we had a little bit more involvement in the first phase. Mainly too, I think we spent a lot of engagement, and it was a lot longer back then too. So
yeah, the first phase was also more online and it was less personal. I actually think just working the project from this side, this was far more engaging for us. So we had more literally face-to-face contact in our neighborhood workshops. The Promotoras did intercept surveys and had face-to-face contact. Probably our best attended workshop was at the Quig Newton community. We did a special workshop there. And I think we had about 30 residents that showed up at that. It is our experience that this phase of engagement tends to be pretty lean when we're just asking folks to think about the neighborhood. Our experience is the next phase tends to be heavier in engagement when we come up with recommendations, because the recommendations are actually getting into, okay, what are we proposing for the neighborhood for the next 5, 10, 20 years? So we're pleased with this. We got some good feedback that is directing the development of recommendations. But we would anticipate actually more in phase 3 when we're rolling out ideas in the neighborhoods. So a couple things I want to do. I just want to summarize very quickly some numbers. And then from this group, because we saw most of you and we saw it, thank you for coming to neighborhood workshops. And we know this group is most knowledgeable of all of this. And really want to get a sense from you guys, what worked, what didn't work. There is a sense from the city team, from the consultant team, that we tried a lot of things and some didn't work as well as others, just in terms of getting a lot of folks to be engaged. We're also fearful that we may have spread ourselves too thin, that there were too many choices almost for neighborhood members. Might have been a little overwhelming with the different topic-based focus groups, the neighborhood workshops, the surveys, all these different things. So our sense is, as we get into the fall, and provided COVID allows us, that we probably will tighten this up and really try to get more neighborhood-based and face-to-face engagement. But we want your input on that tonight. So in terms of the numbers here, there's a lot of numbers, but those orange numbers are the focused outreach. That's where the promotoras and the CCC effort went. And it's interesting to us, we almost got as many surveys through the intercepts as we did on the online platform. And it was 2 different surveys. The online survey, I assume you're all good committee members and you took your online surveys. It was a slog. I mean, there was a lot in the online survey. And if you're passionate about the community, it's great. But if you're less involved, it can be somewhat tedious. There's a lot there. So the intercept survey by design was shorter. And one, because it's an intercept, you're actually interacting with someone. And also, we talked about this at the last meeting. The questions were different because we were looking at different populations. So let's go to let's not go to the next slide yet. Let's back up for just a second. So then we had all these different formats. So there was the surveys, the neighborhood roundtables, workshops, 9 of them. The topic-based meetings, if you recall, some of you sat in on talking about affordable housing or mobility or all these different issues. I don't know if you're aware, we did business focus groups. So in each neighborhood, we did, and those were pretty well attended. We would get about anywhere from 10 to 25 businesses on the screen in each of the neighborhoods for the business focus groups. And the street campaigns, again, were CCC and also Puma staff just trying to distribute materials. And we tried to target areas where the council district didn't hit. Naomi, did I see 7,000 flyers that you guys sent out? Okay, great. So the next 2 slides give you a snapshot of the demographic makeup of who we hit and didn't hear from in phase 1 and our concerted effort in phase 2 to compensate for that. So in phase 1, we were short on younger people. We were short on Latino households. We were short on renters, and we were short on low and mid-income folks. And again, we were relying on sort of traditional engagement. This is a pattern we've seen with those neighborhood planning efforts throughout. But then let's go to phase 2, the next slide. So this is mobilizing the promotoras really leveled the playing field, which was really great to see. So you'll see on the age, we were heavy on young people, which is great because that's where we weren't the first time around. With both the traditional and focused, we got our largest participation was from folks from 19 to 44. So we got a lot of millennials and some Gen Z folks. How would you describe yourself? Hispanic or Latinx in terms of describing themselves was the largest cohort from the focused outreach, as you would expect, but it really helped because of the numbers that we got to level out. So the phase 2 was much more in sync with the demographics that you find in your neighborhoods. Interesting, the traditional was still very white, while the focused was more Latino, more brown. Do you rent or own? Again, the focused outreach, the Promotora approach was able to really get a lot of renters involved. And their response rate was 70–80% renters just from the Promotoras themselves. And on income, we were able to, interestingly here, we were able to get a lot of people who didn't want to tell us what their income was because they could opt out of answering that. But we did get a lot of lower income households as well. Some of that is Quig, but it's also spread throughout the neighborhood in terms of where we hit that demographic. So I think I just have one more slide here. Key themes. This was super helpful. These are key themes from the Promotora interviews and those intercept surveys. And so they did surveys and there's survey data, but there were also a lot of conversations. And when you see the phase 2 engagement report, it's going to have conclusions and then it's going to have quotes from people to give you the flavor of what they're talking about and what they're trying to hit. And those quotes, some of those are anonymous because we asked folks, the Promotoras asked folks, do you want to be identified or not? About half the people identified themselves, about half did not. But you'll see some pretty poignant quotes that really help us understand the nuance here. So the first theme, culture contributes to a sense of belonging and safety. And the other part of that quote was, that's why a lot of people are leaving the neighborhood. A lot of people, particularly Latinx households, leaving the neighborhood because a lot of the cultural underpinnings that they've relied on for generations are just leaving. So when you lose the small business or you lose some of the cultural underpinnings, that's significant. It's in many ways as significant as some of the other factors we always talk about. We always talk about, for example, cost of housing and those types of things and cost of living. Well, yeah, that's a factor, but the loss of these cultural assets in the community is huge. And that's going to be a real focus. We're going to transport that into recommendations. How can we protect and preserve cultural assets that remain and encourage new cultural assets moving forward? Growing elderly population that desires programming that's separate from youth programs, and opportunities, particularly for Latinx elders to come together and socialize. So just thinking about how we do that. After school youth programs are lacking, but strongly desired for working families, particularly in Sunnyside. We heard from a lot of folks, again, Promotora's interviews, increasing crime has reduced a sense of safety and really impacts all aspects of life for folks living in the neighborhoods. We've heard a lot in this process about grocery and food desert. That came up again in the Promotora interviews, barriers to accessing food, and not just the conventional supermarket, but also some of the non-conventional food sources as well. And then interestingly, sidewalks came up, sidewalks and improvements to 38th in particular came up as an area that folks would like to see because it's an area that community members access a lot. And that could be for transportation. It could be for some of the businesses that are along the street. So those are some of the key themes from that. At this point, the next slide, I think I was going to hand over to Sung, but why don't I pause? Because we just threw a lot at you. Why don't we pause? And if there's questions on the focused engagement and what the Promotoras do, I'll answer the best I can. Our program manager for that, Hazmeen, she joined us last meeting. She was not available tonight, so some of these questions I may have to funnel back to Hazmeen, but I'll do the best I can. Questions, comments? Observation, can we take to the councilwoman's suggestion, take the slide off, get everybody on the screen for a moment? Great, thank you. Anything surprise you there or? Yeah, Trupti?
Yeah, hi. I don't actually have specific feedback, just a question. Is it possible on all of the meetings, you know, virtual, all the roundtables, virtual and live, could we get attendance counts for each one of those? I mean,
The
not
data, yeah, I know, but the data exists. Song, I'm
Yeah,
deferring to you.
I think we can. You know, like Trippy, we discussed, we typically post all the raw data on there. So I think in terms of numbers, we could include that. I think it's the same spreadsheet. So yeah, I think we could get that posted online.
Yeah, it's just hard. I mean, we just have to go on memory, like, oh, I don't remember that
Yeah.
many people here, this, you know, so it'll be good to see. Thank you.
Okay. Yep.
Looks like Mike
Great,
has a
sorry.
hand.
Oh yeah, Mike, go for it.
Yeah, I dropped a note in chat too. I was on the Jefferson Park business focus group, and there was a lot of really excellent feedback. But we actually only had 2 businesses that were represented on there. And I mean, I know it's probably not possible to do another one, but if there was any way to try to engage the Jefferson Park businesses a little bit more on the next round, that'd be great, because I thought the insight they had was amazing. I just, you know, it would have been nice to have, you know, another 6 or 8 businesses participate.
Yeah, just a couple of quick comments on that. We will have another shot at this. So when we roll out recommendations, we'll definitely want to circle back. And then Leslie, I don't know if you're going to be raising your hand about our work with the bid, but we did do some work with the bid.
You absolutely did. And sorry for having my camera on mute, but I'm eating my dinner. Mike, what we've seen in the federal bid, and it's a blessing and a curse at the same time, is they've had a ton of folks from the city coming through asking for feedback from Dottie on our bond project, Near Northwest plan, the Northwest Community Transportations Program. So I think that what you might have seen was just a little bit of tiredness on the part of some of my businesses, but Brad came around personally and we had a great day talking to businesses like Arajo's, Adams Mystery Theater, where we were able to go down in depth. So I predict once this plan comes back with actual recommendations, you'll see a re-engagement from some of my businesses, but I think this was just a case where you saw in that one particular meeting where it was just a case of too many meetings, to be quite honest. But thank you again, Brad, for coming door to door, because that makes a tremendous difference for any interview. So thank you. And I'm going to turn my camera off so I can keep eating and not grossing you out.
So thanks for that. Yeah, no, the door to door is the best. And when we did go door to door, we also had Hasmin with us and she's fully bilingual. So that helped a lot as well. Lorenzo.
Yes, I was just a little surprised at the lack of youth programming, and especially in the Sunnyside neighborhood. I've been affiliated with Aslan Recreation Center for many years, and they've done a great job with organizing team sports and other activities for youth. And I don't know, maybe I'll need to check in with them and see what's going on with the activity there, but that was a little surprising to me. But I was also very heartfelt to hear that the promotores have been involved and really brought those demographics and their voice to the table. I salute them. That's not easy work, but they know what they're doing, and making that one-on-one contact, I think, really goes a long way.
Great, thanks for all that. In the interest of time, and again, remember the phase 2 engagement report, I think all 56 pages of it will be headed your way here soon. But Sung, did you want to continue and
Yeah,
finish
I'll
this out?
continue, and then we'll have a moment of pause to just kind of discuss the overall engagement anyhow. So 1 second while I do that. So, cool, great. Well, another thing we mentioned that we were planning to do in phase 2 that we did in phase 1 is continue our youth engagement. And this time it was a little bit different. We we're able to work with our outreach coordinator, Mike Ramsey. I think he came to our meeting once or twice. And he was also able to actually recruit 2 to 3 youth navigators themselves to be able to do a similar thing that the promoters did, where they took the traditional surveys, pulled out the ones that they thought might resonate with most of the students, and then to be able to run that by their colleagues or their cohorts, their friends. And so some of the key themes that that we were able to pick up from some of those surveys were the desire and need for youth community centers. So this was just really, knowing that, they want places to hang out, they want places to be connected to their friends, other resources. So, really building on the previous comments that were and themes that were brought up in the Promotaro comments as well. The second was more entertainment options. So kind of related to youth community center, right? So just to be able to have more places to hang out with their friends and feel more welcomed was something that really keeps coming up again and again. And then the industrial conversation really intrigued them in terms of thinking about the future vision. So when they were discussing the industrial areas, I think they just acknowledged that they wanted to see a diversity of uses and services, including housing, but also they specifically called out resource centers that are helpful for the community, and recreational opportunities. The youth likes to run around, so they want places to be able to exert their kind of energy in physical activities like that. And then they also mentioned better managing traffic around North High, and then also getting to Viking Park a little bit easier. I know right now from North it's a bit difficult, but they want to be able to access and use that park a little bit better. So going into the next slide, again, this is just an opportunity to open it up for the rest of the group. For phase 2 engagement, I think, in reflecting with our team, we really thought, the 3 elements of success in coming out of phase 2 was really the focus engagement, right? Just understanding who we reached, but also the substance of what we heard, and really being able to get those voices at the table before we really get into the draft recommendations writings to make sure that their views are represented in this next few phases. And the online surveys, I think, are becoming more and more popular, especially as we get into this COVID hybrid world. People like the online convenience. People also like to weigh in on certain topics that resonates with them. So, some people might take the land use survey, some people might just take the mobility survey. So giving that flexibility, I think, is important. And I think people really found that important as well. And then the last one, I think, group discussions. People really just like getting around the table and to be able to talk to each other, talk to the neighbors. And we thought that really produced some thoughtful conversations, same kind of experiences that you guys had in these steering committees, where we do smaller breakout sessions and to be able to talk to one another and build upon each other's ideas. Other thoughts, I think Brad alluded to this, that maybe we stretched ourselves a little bit thin about having too many meetings to choose from. Not only just thinking about the meetings that we're hosting and advertising, but the city does a lot in terms of planning and outreach. So to not overexhaust the community even more beyond just CPD meetings, but considering other partner agency and their efforts as well. So I'll go ahead and just kind of open it to the group and kind of see what you guys think. I think Troopy raised her hand, so I'll let her speak, but feel free to come off mute as well.
Thank you. As in terms of the too many meetings, I think what I found that was a little challenging, and I don't work, so I have more time than most, were that a bunch of them were like consecutive in the same week, day after day after day. I just can't imagine, folks just having every night to be able to go, to something related to this, beyond the fact that there is a lot going on and there's a lot of outreach and input and the fatigue around that. But just not having them all in the same week and consecutive, that could be a little helpful.
I see Bill Harrell said not too many meetings as well, kind of similar to Troopy. Did you want to add anything to that, Bill?
Just that I think you need the options. I mean, I can understand those of you that are very close to this, steering committees very close to this, it may feel like a lot of meetings, but I think to the layperson out in the community, it was not too many. I mean, we need at least that many to really, you know, crack the consciousness of the layperson out in the neighborhood.
Is there anything else people felt like we kind of learned about how to do outreach, like what works or what doesn't work through this kind of first process from your experience of it, that we kind of should keep with us as we move through the next phase?
I liked your topics. So for me, as what's unique in Denver is I'm a land use commissioner and I'm a city council person, which is not happen in every jurisdiction in Denver. So for you to be able to focus on that was really helpful, because it actually helped prepare my office with some of the overlay because of the work that you all had done, which was really useful. And to make sure that those topics, even though there were tons of meetings, Gina and I had meeting fatigue. I'm not going to lie. And I had my staff at all of them because I wanted to make sure that if there wasn't enough participation, we could fill in from the things that we heard in our office. We weren't trying to dominate the meetings. I just wanted to make sure that our office is used as a conduit. But in those meetings, I think Gina, who's not a land use person, learned land use, certain things that were going on. And for me, who's probably listens to mobility, but have been so in it with ADUs and overlays, that to have the mobility ones was really, really nice. And then to go above and beyond. And when I walked into the Quig Newton one, my heart just exploded, because that is what I was hoping that we would be able to do, is peel the onion of the layer of the onion back. And even though we've had a lot of meetings, I really do feel like we actually have a reflective voice of what I've been hearing in my neighborhood all my 43 years of my life. And it's gratifying for me as the elected representative. So just wanted to throw that out there.
Oh, thank you for sharing that. That's really helpful to hear. Does anyone else want to add to it in terms of what we learned? It could be like, it could not just be the meeting, like the number of meetings or the types of meetings, but like how we frame them and how we discuss things. Anything you think that kind of you've learned that will help us do better in phase 3, or that we should make sure we continue doing into phase 3?
Okay, well, no, these are all good comments. So yeah, so we'll kind of take all of this and, sorry, I gotta go close my door.
Leslie had a question.
Oh, okay,
About
great.
zoning in Quig Newton, but I don't know how to answer it, but
Yeah,
maybe
let
you can answer
me
the chat.
have a quick comment on Quig, because we learned a ton just going in there, doing the workshop. And actually some of our, what we think, you will think, I hope, some of our more exciting ideas for Sunnyside sort of crystallized actually in that workshop when we were hearing to some of the residents. But I think one thing it did is expanded our minds beyond just the footprint of Quig. So Quig is going to go through some sort of redevelopment, and it's going to go through the process, that we've seen over at, I guess, at Mariposa and over in Sun Valley. So it's going to go through that type of process. And I think our team, one of our initial suggestions is to think outside the footprint of the community, because there are a lot of properties and potential assets that could be integrated. There's some empty land that's catty corner that could be more recreational or park or who knows, maybe some sort of civic facility space or something that really serves the neighborhood well. The whole boundary with which what we're going to talk about, we're going to talk about tonight, the industrial area that's slated to be more of a community center and the opportunity to shape that. But to be able to do that also in the context of Quig, which is arguably the study area's largest opportunity for more affordable housing moving forward, to retain the housing that's there. And again, by looking at neighboring properties and some of the ideas, Nola, you sent me a bunch of great ideas on housing. I mean, the land trust that you've pioneered in GES is a type of concept that could be used in conjunction, actually in all these neighborhoods, but the Quig property in particular. So I don't want to go too far on this. So it sort of got us out of planning view, which is, oh, what's the zoning and how's it going to be and all that, and started thinking about it in terms of a community, and also got us thinking about, let's not think about hard edges here. Let's think about how it relates to what's around it. So Leslie, I don't know if that answered your question or not. But it was pretty exciting, actually.
Great. Awesome.
I have a quick question about what you just said, Brad. When you said that Quig might go the way of Sun Valley and sort of the other housing developments that have happened around Denver, does that mean that they're going to move people out to build and then move them back in? Because I think if that's happening, we really need to focus on keeping connections with those populations. I worked in La Alma Park and Lincoln Park when that happened there, and they just like bumped people and said they kept in touch, but like there was no real system and there was no real connection. And I don't know how many families moved back. So yeah, so I think if that's happening, I guess it's more of a statement than a question, but if that's happening, then I think part of this plan should really include ways to continue to engage the community that could be displaced, to make sure they have points for reentry if they want to come back. Because that was like heartbreaking to watch that happen in Lincoln Park.
It was, and in talking to Renee and other folks at DHA, ultimately DHA is going to be driving that, and you hope that DHA sort of learns through each iteration and improves upon its process. But this is unique. This is a unique opportunity where these neighborhood plans really could shape that process and that outcome in a very different way. I mean, DHA will do what it does on its land, but this plan could inform, it could make process suggestions like you just did, making sure that we protect and preserve the community members that are there, and make sure their interests are central to this. And then again, this notion of looking around Quig and not just on the footprint of the community itself. And are there ways to accommodate folks to stay in the neighborhood, even if it's across the street? I know in Sun Valley there's been a lot of displacement, and I think there's a lot of bitterness there for that. So I don't want to ramble, but I think there's lessons learned, one at DHA, and then two, the opportunity for this plan to help in a way shape certainly the envelope that Quig is rethought within. And perhaps we can make some process recommendations too. I think that's fair game.
Tricky, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. Questions on the feedback and the workshop at Quig, and I assume that'll be in the bigger document, right, that you're going to send. But I'm curious about one thing that I had never thought of until someone else in a different conversation were talking about Sun Valley, and how Sun Valley went to, the high-rise kind of model from this single, double. I guess Quig is mostly 1-story or 2-story for the most part. Did you guys get a sense of, how their living environment would change from going to a single story to a high rise? And the thought is, if you got kids, do you want, they could go out the front door and play in the front yard if you're on the, first floor, even second floor. But when you're a high rise, you're probably no longer going to let them go down, their staircase by themselves, whatever. So I didn't know whether you got any feedback on the way they live, and whether what is planned for them actually aligns with the way they want to live.
And again, I can only speak to, because I was managing, there were 3 tables that were being managed, and there were anywhere from 5 to a dozen residents at each of these tables that were being managed. I got pretty clear sense from the folks at my table that, they're not hip to the tall buildings and all of that, sure, if we can improve the housing, let's improve the housing. But the scale where they're living seems to work for them. And to your point, there's a lot of family members there. And I think there's a desire to better configure what's next to better utilize and create green space. To your point, it'd be great if there was a quad or something where my kids can play and I can see them from my porch, So I, again, I don't think Renee is here tonight, so I don't want to go too far out there, but I from my small sample, there was not much of an appetite. There was an appetite to improve. There was an appetite for more amenities. There was an appetite for more green. There was not any interest in going up. And a lot of that gets to what you were just alluding to, family and all of that.
And also just having, Councilwoman Sandoval, did you unmute yourself to say something?
Yeah, just wanted to say that we have the West Area Plan going on right now, and their recommendations came out, and so Renee's been having to, and like literally my Teams is going off because that's going on at the same time in my council district, but this was important. But I would say when I was there, Trupti, I don't remember asking that kind of question. It was more of a like, how have you lived here, and how do you experiencing life through their eyes, and the lack of connection and the connectivity that I've seen that I didn't really call out. And none of them, most of them, in my personal experience of talking to them, are people who live there most of their lives, are generational. And so I don't think that they're very aware of what's gone on in Sun Valley or in La Alma Lincoln Park. I've learned that DHA is very factioned in their approach, which is good or bad, take it where you leave it. And I agree with you, Emily, that we need to make sure that we have a prioritization policy in place in this plan, because the federal Decatur area plan, station area plan, dictated the Sun Valley plan, and the La Alma plan, which was very antiquated, dictated La Alma. So we actually can set a precedent here as they redevelop it to have a prioritization policy. And for those who don't know what that means, meaning that it's a priority that you are from this neighborhood, you go back into this neighborhood as affordable housing is built through. But I didn't hear that conversation. I just heard people taking real pride in the neighborhood that they live in, and taking real pride in schools, and what schools did they feel connected to and why, and schools that they wanted to feel new connections to, and actually other parts of the neighborhood that they really do want to feel a different experience in.
Yeah, and a lot of those conversations, at least having been kind of plugged in and out of the West Ridge master plan process, they do a really good job during their master planning process to kind of understand from a design perspective, like how does that work with, the lifestyles that people want to live. And so they have some pretty cool concepts coming out of their master plan where, they have these little courtyard spaces where people can hang out, see their children. So they're pretty good about responding to the needs of the community, from at least kind of how I saw their public process play out there. Noah, did you raise your hand too?
Yeah, I had two comments, I think, and I hope they're not repetitive because I'm coming in late here. But I am part of a project right now that's working on, that's could be up to 7 stories, but I don't think it'll go that high for the whole thing. But we're looking at integrated courtyards, like within the building itself. So there could be also ways to get some additional density. And like, we always want to, if we can get more affordable housing, that's a good thing, right? But ways to have courtyards that could be on a second story, that could be like a courtyard within that people could utilize, but things like that. But I think there's ways to make it work. Also, I think thinking forward about how, that's a transit area. That's, I doubt we're going to be, that DHA is going to go at like the same level of density that they have right now. They're going to take that opportunity to build more units. So, but I think that like the core of what you're saying, I'm very, very curious about just generally like how, that's what's happening with displacement, right? Is that people that have lived in single family homes are often having to move into multifamily living, and how is that going? I'm very curious. And what are things that could make the quality of life higher that could be part of those sort of multifamily developments? So I think it's a really good issue to think about. And then I have heard from the prioritization policy that the city is working on is that DHA is exempt from that. So I think I don't know if I missed something, but I think that what Councilman Sandoval is saying is really important, like we to have as a recommendation, because DHA actually does not have to follow the city's prioritization policy, at least at the point of recommendations that it's at right now. That hasn't passed council yet, but just wanted to throw that out there too. And I know it's different, like when people are being displaced and then brought back, I think there is a way to have priority for those people. But if we're thinking about also just like for all the housing that would go in there, if we can also keep people in the entire area have priority to live there, that's kind of two different questions or areas of.
Awesome. Thank you, Nola. Anything else before kind of we move on? Got one more slide, then we can take a 5-minute break and then get into the next agenda item. Right. 1 second. This will be quick and then we'll take a break. Great. So the next thing, this is kind of more of a preview of what's coming next as well. So these are the poll results from our vision statements that we were collaborating together and co-authoring on early in the process. These are just kind of percent of respondents that either strongly agree or somewhat agree. So as a reminder, we've had individual vision statements based on our comprehensive plan. And they all kind of line up and fit under these different unique sections that we anticipate having in the near Northwest area plan. So we got a lot of great open feedback as well. So we're continuing to refine the vision statements. So in this next few months, we'll kind of bring those back out to you and just show you how those have changed based on all the feedback we received so far. So just wanted to kind of share that with you all and just give you a sneak preview of what's coming in the future. So with that, I think we can take a 5-minute break and be back at 6:55 exactly, and then we can start the next agenda item. So, all right, see you guys in 5 minutes. I'll just take the cue as cameras flip on that I can kind of share my screen and get back into presentation mode. So let's give it a, oh, there it is. All right, let me go ahead and share my screen and then we can start the quick presentation and then dive into discussion again. Let's see. Oh, back to the top. Not what I wanted. Great. So for tonight, again, this is just a reminder that we've had, 5 focus area or 5 focus topic discussions, and this is our 5th one, and it's focused around the Sunnyside industrial area. So just to kind of give you a little bit of background information on just kind of current conditions of the area, it's approximately 90 acres and it has approximately about 1,000 employees. The building stock is older and tends to be a bit smaller than some of the blockier, larger manufacturing and distribution buildings up north, further in Chaffee Park. Has a mix of uses right now with industrial or retail, a police facility, and kind of storage facilities that are scattered throughout the area. So really the question here tonight is that, and the thing we've been wrestling with the community is that the outline area in red that you see there is identified as a community center in Blueprint Denver. So as a reminder, the community center is a future place type designation, meaning that it allows for a mix of uses, including housing, retail, and employment opportunities. However, right now, as you see highlighted in the orange box outline, is primarily zoned for industrial land. So in the Denver zoning code, I think we call that IA zoning. So it doesn't allow for the housing and the type of place that Blueprint Denver calls for today. Just to understand kind of the surrounding context and what's happening throughout, there's a lot of investment happening and development happening around the 41st and Fox Station area. Again, a new police station north of Quake Newton. Again, when we were talking about Quake Newton potentially redeveloping into a higher density, more mixed use environment. And then there are also active kind of uses that are coming up in the area, including wineries, breweries, Denver Beer Co. is located there. And also some key destinations we've heard from people, including Mile High Comics and other local businesses in the area as well. And then if we look at further east, there's the Fox Park redevelopment happening in that area. And then a lot of key destinations nearby. And then that, regional access, looking at I-25 and I-70. This is something I wanted to share with you guys that's been happening and having conversation. So as part of the Fox Park redevelopment, they've reached a certain amount of vehicle trips, which require them to provide a connection out of Fox Park, either kind of further north under I-70 through a tunnel or through a bridge across 47th Avenue Bridge. So they're currently in the process of understanding the feasibility and the possibility of one of these connections, either through 47th Avenue across the bridge under I-70, and it's going through right now internally at an executive level to decide what type of connection should be made as part of the redevelopment. And right now, I think the direction is headed towards 47th Avenue Bridge. So the reason why I bring this up is obviously it has impacts if there are multimodal connections into 47th Avenue, where we're talking about the industrial area. So just wanted to provide that as additional context of information as we have this conversation.
We had a couple questions in the chat. I don't know if you wanted to.
Oh, I can't
touch
see
on those
anything right now.
first.
So
Okay, so Leslie and Emily both had questions. So Leslie's was 1,000 jobs is a lot of jobs. How many are projected if this becomes a community center, and will that switch to a retail and restaurant heavy environment mean that those jobs are created that pay less than industrial?
yeah, so that's exactly the conversation we're going to have here today. And I'll speak to some of the kind of community feedback we received so far and to build on that. But yeah, definitely jobs is definitely part of the conversation. For now, I don't know if we have projections based on like land use on how much jobs are going to be there based on community center. But I think the conversation is about how do we think about workforce and how do we think about future employment in this area? So. What was the next question, Grace?
Emily just had kind of I think a question about the map. She said, are those parts of the neighborhood on the other side of the railroad tracks, quote, Fox Park, part of the area of focus? So are they included in our?
Yeah, so no, they're not included in the near northwest plan boundary. It's just more of an influence area. And I just wanted to highlight the future multimodal connection across 47th Avenue. Great.
Yeah, and Leslie had just kind of a related question about where would those industrial jobs go, but it sounds like maybe we're going to be talking about this.
Yeah, so yeah, it's really just a conversation with the community. Yep. So looking at the Denver Future Place category again, these are some poll results from the public roundtable discussions we've had earlier in March. But again, community center is imagined to be a mix of uses up to 5 stories generally, and closer to the Fox Station area, it's high medium residential, so a mix of residential structures up to 8 stories generally, and then transitioning and tapering down in height as you travel further west. So generally, when we had the smaller roundtable discussion, I think people generally agreed that these are the right designations and based on kind of what they anticipate and what they think the vision should be for the area. So going again, looking at feedback from the public roundtable, we specifically asked them, what are your priorities in terms of, your vision for the future land use for the area? We wanted to dig a little deeper. So the options were retaining light industrial uses and keeping some of those jobs while converting some of the buildings to active commercial uses. So what's kind of happening today, maybe establishing an employment center with more office and live workspaces, creating a mixed use destination, but focused on dining, entertainment, and shopping, or creating a mixed use neighborhood with active ground floors and a mix of housing options. And others, I think, were just, when people spoke up, it was kind of a mix of a lot of different of these things. So generally, you kind of got a even response across the board in that roundtable, but more focused on the entertainment side from, again, the public roundtable discussion. So this is the feedback from the online survey. We asked the same question here. Again, a mix. So the highest was mixed use neighborhood followed by mixed use destination, but also a good amount of people also thought we need to retain some of the industrial while just allowing some buildings to convert. So and giving people the flexibility to choose multiple options. We also talked about, what are your priorities for the industrial area? So when we talk about the different types of investments and improvements, what do you think should be a priority? The top 3 results that we got were pedestrian-friendly streets and streetscapes, pet and bike connections to nearby destinations and neighborhoods, and then buffers along the railroad tracks. So based on all the input we received and understanding that, people really want to see more of an eclectic mix of the neighborhood, that, this community center isn't truly just a mixed use center, but to be able to think about retention and of employment and light industrial uses that already exist. These future place categories represent what already exists in Blueprint today. So within the centers, we have our local, community, regional, and then within our district category, we have heavy production, which means kind of your heavier industrial, value manufacturing, which is really typically our regular industrial uses, something that you might see further up in the Chaffee Park industrial district. And then the next really is what we call innovation and flex. So this is kind of your mixed use industrial category, where it allows for assembly labs, small logistics and warehousing. But it says that residential is also compatible and streets are on a kind of a standard grid. So kind of smaller block sizes and a range of different parks and open space investments. So I think, as we were having this conversation, I think there's an opportunity to think about, what does innovation flex look like in the context of this area?
Before you go forward, Rebecca had a question, I think more pertaining to the public input. She wanted to know how much more current industrial owners and employees involved in the discussion.
Yeah, that's great. I'm actually going to get to that in this next slide here. I mentioned that we had that property and business owner meeting, which we had a couple of steering committees attend, and I'll summarize kind of the input that we received there. But we did have an opportunity to have a smaller, more focused business and property owner meeting earlier in March, and then a follow-up one in early April. So really, when we talked about the future vision with folks, the questions we really were asking, what is your vision for the area in the next 20, 30 years? What is an appropriate scale if it were to redevelop? What uses should remain, be added? How can this area benefit the neighborhood? And what are your concerns? And really trying to understand that the changes to the place designation, if we were to look at changes as part of this process, what would that look like? So we asked a lot of that when the public feedback, and then asked similar questions with the property owner meeting that was held in early April. And so we had some, a good charrette exercise, and we're able to get people at the table to talk about specific ideas and improvements. And we just wanted to kind of share some of the big ideas that came from those discussions. I think people noticed that and acknowledged that Jason Street as a main street from Mile High Comics down all the way down to the 41st and Fox, knowing that there is some market activity and active uses coming there already. So building on that market to be able to create some placemaking opportunities along that corridor. I think someone also acknowledged that there's a trail connection north under I-70 that actually gets you all the way to Boulder. I don't fully understand how that connection is made, but we're working with our transportation team to see what connections exist there. People had a cool idea of repurposing some of the rail spurs to a trail and open space connection like the 39th Avenue Greenway, urban farms that are integrated in the industrial area. Again, Quig Newton always comes up in these conversations about being redesigned and incorporate into a larger area concept where they're complementary with one another and there's not a hard edge, kind of what Brad described. And then a grocery store. I think we hear a lot about this throughout the process, and knowing that it is a visible location along I-70, I-25 to think about an option for a grocery store. A farmer's market, a temporary farmer's market that happens at Denver Beer Co. parking lot for more activity, a new rec center, so Aslan Rec Center, embedded within the Quig area to be able to see, what's the possibility of that rec center in the future, and can it be incorporated into a future master plan? And then just this idea, again, I think Brad kind of touched on, of repurposing public land in the area, including the Denver Parks property for, all different types of uses, including a neighborhood park. Some of the uses and future uses and assets that the property owner and business owners that mentioned were, again, Mile High Comics. I don't know how many people in the neighborhood are familiar with this, with the Mile High Comics, but they do some pretty cool things in addition to retail. They host a lot of community events there. It's a destination now, and it can continue to be a destination in the future. Again, taking advantage of the visibility from I-70, I-25, understanding that affordable housing is critical in this area when thinking about the future. And again, understanding that industrial flex is desired to be able to retain industrial and transition some back to mixed use, or not back, but into mixed use housing and housing as well. Requiring other uses than residential and critical locations. So understanding, what other uses, including retail and commercial facilities, are needed to support a growing population, and celebrating the history that have existed over time within this area. Some of the concerns, however, were, don't allow surface parking, but make sure that everything is underground or within structures. And there's a lot of concern that if we're not careful of how we approach this area in terms of implementation and advancing the vision, ultimate vision, that that it would result in a lot of displacement of businesses. And so there's a lot of concern about how we approach it. I think property taxes were a big concern, that this affects the business owners more than the property owners themselves, that they feel like when the property values rise and the taxes increase, most of the business owners really bear that burden, especially understanding how the tax structure works within Colorado. Closing streets for construction could also harm existing businesses. So as this area transitions over time, how do we make sure that it doesn't have a huge negative impact on current businesses there? Don Foods, I think, one of our steering committee, Bill, is in contact with them and trying to understand what their future might look like, and if any, with the industrial area. So they might be potentially leaving, creating an opportunity of what might go in. It could be a park, could be affordable housing, could be a hotel. So just trying to understand, what their plans are, and the potential for kind of replacement of Don Foods in the future. So really,
we had a few comments and questions. Lots of love for Mile High Comics, yeah. But also also there was a few more questions. So sorry, is there a Denver Parks property beside the rec center?
Besides the rec center?
Beside it. Oh, besides the rec center, yeah. Besides the rec center.
I think there's yeah, the one I'm trying to like point my cursor, but along 45th, between 45th and 44th, I think there's like a maintenance facility center there. But I think Anna Claudia's on the call too, and she might know a little bit more. But yeah, I think there's some kind of scattered throughout, and maybe Brad might know as well.
I know at the Quig meeting on your map, of course I have my cursor on it, but that doesn't mean anything. But to the left of this left boundary at the top of the community center near I-70, there's a green space in there. And I don't know if it's necessarily Denver Parks, but there's sort of a big sort of green open space that I know a lot of people said was underutilized.
Yeah,
go ahead, Bill.
Something's changing there, because I believe it used to be a rec center. I don't know what it was affiliated with, but very recently, DHA signage went up. So I'm not sure to what degree DHA is now using that facility or how they're using it, but the signage has changed. And just so that we don't have confusion, there's actually two Denver rec nodes, if you will. There's the ones we're talking about here that's up on 46th, And then there's also the building catty corner from the south end of the building that abuts Mile High. And that is where they store a lot of their materials for Denver Park and Rec. It's essentially an industrial building and parking lot. It's about half of a full block, kind of squeezed in between the south end of Mile High Comics and Denver Beer Company.
So that
Noel asked,
field, I was just gonna ask, that field that sort of runs along Pecos across the street from the post office, that's connected to the school, right? Strive Prep, or there's a Sunnyside Strive right there. Is that connected or is that not connected?
That's a Denver park.
It's a
Right.
park, so it's not the schoolyard.
No.
Okay.
But it feels like the schoolyard.
Yeah, it looks
Yeah.
like it's the
Also-
same thing.
It's
Yeah.
also unnamed, so we have
Okay.
no name on that park.
Same with Horace Mann too, or Trivista, right? There's a extended.
And that's an interesting thing because I think people do mistake both of those properties, right, for school properties. So we should be doing something to make them more attractive to individuals. You know, there's no playground, there's nothing there that would be appealing for folks to go in. It just looks like, you know, I'm sure it's being used as a dog park many times.
Any
is
other?
it helpful to go through any more of the comments, or I can, there was a question of what's up with the Boys and Girls Club.
Mhm.
That was Nola's question. Nola, do you want to elaborate on that at all, or?
It's just been empty for a long time.
And is that the
Mhm.
one at the top of Pecos and 46, right?
I-
It's on the.
I believe so. And I believe
south
that's the one
east
that's been,
corner.
I believe that's the same one that now has DHA signage.
Oh,
on.
thank you. I didn't.
Oh,
know
I was
that.
wondering if that's what you were talking about. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, how about we go with any clarifying questions on what I presented and then really just kind of turn it over to you guys. It seems like there's a lot of comments here, but have people speak up and speak to the things that you're writing about. But when we think about the vision and the future of these areas, of this area specifically, what else should we be considering? Are there ideas that were kind of brought from the community that resonates with you? Other considerations, impacts that we need to think about as we move into kind of draft recommendations and thinking about alternatives for the future of this area. Yes, Leslie.
I just want to go back to my earlier comment in the chat. One of the things I want to keep in our minds is, the cost of living in Denver, as we know, is very expensive. And I'm worried that if we rid ourselves of 1,000 industrial jobs in this area and replace them with retail jobs, that we're doing some of our citizens a disservice. And so I will leave my comment there. Thank you.
Yeah, so just kind of understanding workforce development and having that kind of focus on the current industry that exists there instead of wholesale change.
Yes, and just the current existence of 1,000, what might be middle-class jobs being replaced with fewer minimum wage jobs is my high concern on this area. But I think that there's room to kind of feather industrial along I-70, I-25 and the railroad to provide that buffer between the transportation corridors and housing. And so my ultimate hope is that we don't rid ourselves completely of this industrial area, but to reconfigure it so that the heavier industrial is along the highway corridor and the railroad, and then kind of feather back towards residential. Thank you.
Yeah, and Naomi had something in the chat kind of going off what you're saying, Leslie, about, would be interesting to discuss this, sorry, this area in context with the industrial area north in Chaffee Park. So, I think that's identified the industrial preservation area. Are there opportunities? Would businesses relocate is that is that industrial enough? So be able to kind of think about that north location in the context of this conversation as well. So
Troop D's had her hand for a bit too, and then
Okay.
I just noticed Rebecca
oh
put her
yeah,
hand.
go ahead and just unmute and chime in.
Thanks. Couple of questions, comments. You know, you mentioned the medium density of, you know, up to 8 stories. And I think that's great. What my concern is, if they can go up to 8, then they could go up to only 5 or 4 or 3. And my question is on the cost. So, I mean, what I've heard is if you have to build up to 8, you are now getting into more expensive materials, okay? And when you have to build up to 8, now it becomes expensive to build just 8. It makes more sense to go to 10 or 12. Otherwise, my concern is you're only going to get 5 stories there because, you know, 5 above, you know, stick, whatever they call it, is the cheapest, you know, product and easy to reproduce. And that's what's going up everywhere. So how will we get the 8 if people are going to be allowed to build 5 and may end up more desirable from, you know, a developer standpoint? I guess, you know, how do we get the higher density? And does 8 make sense, or should it be, you know, are the financials and the economics such that 8 is not a great point? You know, it needs to be, you know, it's either 5 or you get up to 10 to make the financials work. So that's kind of one of my concerns, is how will we ensure the higher density? Because I think we do want that. Overall, it makes sense to put it there. And the second one is, we're talking about a lot of things and a lot like this big vision. My fear here is that we have no master plan. I think we need a master plan to be added into the recommendations, not just rezoning, giving entitlement with absolutely zero constraints on, you know, the services that are needed and such. So how will we ensure that the vision, the ideas, suggestions, recommendations actually happen?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, Troop D, about the master plan. And when you talk about the master plan, can you kind of explain, talk a little bit more about like what you imagine the master plan would be like in terms of level of detail and guidance?
Well, so I think in one of your slides, you guys had the word master plan in there. So, I mean, I would ask you possibly, what does that look like? But to me, it looks like if we're trying to redevelop this and we wanted to include these set of things, how do we ensure that when what we're dealing with is just a bunch of individual people who can do whatever they want up to 5 stories and 8 stories? How will we ensure, I mean, the amount of commercial space that would be required, you know? I think people put in things like, you know, the aesthetics. How will we ensure those things without, in the way that we're dealing with them right now, which is one off, one off, one off? And even if we gave away the entitlement, if there's no other restrictions or constraints or recommendations, I don't know what you guys do to ensure the outcome being what we're envisioning.
Yeah.
So call it what you want. You know, master plan is just a term I'm using for lack of a better term.
Yeah, I could have kind of addressed that a little bit. You know, a recent policy and kind of amendment to the Denver zoning code that was introduced not too long ago was the large development review. So that was recognizing kind of a similar issue where, you know, we have these larger development projects happening. There's not really a conversation or an opportunity to go back and forth. So how do we do that? So, you know, the large development review process was created to make sure that if the active development project came in and it was 5 acres or bigger, you know, it allows for more review and back and forth with the applicant on, you know, talking about plan guidance and the desired outcomes and having more commitments from the property owner. You know, I think we can think about a unique strategy in the context of the industrial area, right? So, you know, truthfully, you talk about 5-8, but they're not entitled 5-8 right now. That's the plan guidance, but they're zone I-8.
Oh, no,
So,
I know that. I'm talking about the fact that we're
right.
going to move towards changing that. And the
Mhm.
thing, my point there is, how will we get the 8 and not just get 5? So how will we get the medium density where we want it and the lower, the 5 where we want it? On the 5, you could say up to 5, but if we go up to 8, couldn't they build 5? That's the.
Oh, yeah.
That
I
can
guess I'm
happen
talking
but
more
that can
about,
happen anywhere. So
Right.
you can zone, I mean, you can zone anywhere. People are zoning down in Lodo at 16 stories and they're only building 8 and 12. So as we deal with the inflation and as we deal with, like I talked to Bill the other day, lumber costs, you're not gonna be, there's no incentive to do that for right now. But I think what she's talking about is like a mandatory LDR, and I don't even know, the city doesn't even, like, that's a large development review. The city doesn't do that, Trupti, and
Well, I
what
know
you're
that.
talking
That's why I
about is like an overlay for the aesthetics, like what they did in Rhino. That gets into the weeds. This is like the super, super high level, and then we do the recommendation, and then that's the legislation, right?
Well,
So
I
it's
mean,
like the
we're gonna
layer
spend
cake.
2 years talking about this kind of stuff.
Yeah, and then that doesn't change any of the zoning, and
And-
it only
No,
has the
no, I
recommendation.
get that, but why are we spending all this time talking about what we want when we get down to it? If people are just gonna throw their hands up and say, we don't have the tools to deal with it,
Right.
then we need to go back and figure out, let's get the tools in place. Because I mean, that's kind of my concern is
Yeah.
like, without the tools, how do we achieve what
Right.
we're looking for? And if there are no tools, go develop them.
Right,
mean,
Trupti, I think that's really the conversation, right? We don't have the tools. But what I'm trying to say is, the industrial area, right? A lot of it is IA, but we have a lot of discrepancy or the delta, between what we want and what they have entitled today. So I think we can recommend some kind of regulatory trigger or some new process around getting them to commit to the certain ideas in our plan process so that they can actually build, what the plan guidance calls for. So I think, the fact that they're not entitled to do it today, but the stronger the vision is and the priorities we want this to the future development and investment in this area to accomplish, I think we'll have a better time kind of pointing to those asks and then trying to figure out in the interim after the plan adoption, how do we implement it from a regulatory standpoint? So the vision I want to emphasize, is very important because we can always take time to figure out the tools. We're probably not going to just straight rezone or legislate rezone this and lose that opportunity. So if we have a strong vision, we need to figure out the regulatory process to get us there.
Well, thank you. That's comforting to know that we're not just going to upzone without actually some level of insurance that
Right.
the vision is actually going to be an outcome we can, expect. Thank you.
Great. And Rebecca, you have your hand up. Sorry, I want to let you.
Okay. Couple things. As you know, with me, the ideas come in floods.
Mhm.
There's a business in this area we're looking at, Denver Bookbinding. And it's a traditional kind of low impact building. They repair books and print and buy new ones. And they're not high tech. And I noticed there was references in future planning to, ways of bringing in more high tech. That brings in well-educated, well-paid people, but it also encourages a demand for probably less affordable housing. The stuff around the 41st and Fox light rail station is going to be more high end because having dealt with those developers, that's what they're going for. They're looking for more of the population that is already displacing the people in our neighborhood. So it's really easy to do a combination of jobs and housing that automatically leads to displacement. And again, I guess I'm building a little bit on what Trupti was saying. It's, we've seen in this whole Northwest side how easy it is to build affordability out of the neighborhood. So I'd like to see us finding some ways of encouraging lighter heritage industrial to remain. Something like the Denver Bookbinder, which by the way was forced out of Lower Highland. It'd been in Lower Highland for 100 years, and between rising taxes and everything else, they left. Or things like the winery that's been operating out of that area for a while. So that's one of my thoughts. The other one is that, just as a bit of perspective, that whole river area between North Denver and Globeville, basically, speaking of our neighborhoods in a generic North Denver sense, was farms. It was little tiny farms, and it would be interesting if we could we were talking about honoring the heritage, honor the heritage in such a way that we're encouraging that sustainable agriculture.
Awesome. Any other comments? I do have a prompt question. If other people, yep, Miguel or Nola, sorry, I'm just reading.
I want to I really agree with the sentiment of being able to maintain industrial and industrial jobs in that area. I feel like if we didn't, or for any shift in that, there has to be like a larger recognition of the impact that has, if that makes sense. So like if we're losing, however many jobs, what's the sort of compensation to rebalance the ecosystem of that area in a way? Like if, so I mean, in some ways, it could be, I've thought of it as like, oh, well, it should be more affordability, but it's not as simple as that, because where, like I think Leslie was saying, like, where do those jobs go? What, if we don't have those jobs, those people are gonna leave too, like we, and working and living close together is really important, and our city is drastically losing industrial, and what's replacing it is completely changing the ecosystem of what was there, which is adding to this, like everybody's been saying, adding to displacement, both of businesses and people and so on. So I feel like I don't know if there's a way to say like, stay industrial, and if you shift away from IA, then there's all these additional sort of requirements or vision components or something like that. I don't know. I'm just throwing that out there.
Brad kind of addressed it here, or speaking to it a little bit, like how about a net zero policy on industrial jobs like we do with affordable housing? If we lose X jobs, we gain X jobs elsewhere to keep the 1,000. So Nola, I think I hear you. I think you're talking about, like, we talk about anti-displacement in the context of like residential areas, but when we talk about the industrial, it's a little different when we throw the jobs and kind of housing in the mix. So, it's not like a one size fits all solution. So to be able to think more innovatively about what that looks like in this setting. Yeah. Bill, Troop D and Bill, I don't know who had their hand up first, but.
Oh, Bill can go first.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess I just want to try to add a little context for people. I'll try to be brief, but I could talk for an hour on this topic. Many of you don't know me. I own Little Colorado at 44th and LaPan, so smack in the middle of this area. We're a small manufacturing business. We've been there for 20 years. I bought the business 6 years ago. We employ about 20 people. 4 of them are actually from Quig Newton. And I can tell you all 4 of the people that we hire from New Quig Newton are paid a minimum wage. So be careful to think that just because it's a quote unquote industrial location that there's a high wage. Those days are gone. The businesses that pay high wage are either high tech or high margin. So they're either high tech or they're cannabis. or maybe maybe beer. And you've heard a lot of talk about taxation. The taxation problem is built into Colorado law, and it is onerous on business owners. But if you own your building, it's not so onerous because you're benefiting from the reason that the taxes are going up because your property's escalating in value. I bought my business 6 years ago. My landlord is the previous owner of the business. I have a first right of refusal to buy the building, but he has no intention of selling it. He's living the dream, seeing the price go up. So the businesses that are healthy and that are going to stay are ones like Mile High Comics and Denver Beer Company and Denver Bookbinding because they own their building. So that's really, you need to understand that point of differentiation and where that part of the problem is coming from. And it's going to be a very difficult circumstance. All of this is not easy and it's not cookie cutter. And we're not going to be able to predetermine all of it. We're going to have to try to set the stage the best we can, and then try to work with the people that come to us and bring about the best outcome possible.
There were a couple of people asking just about if there was any data on the people who work in the industrial jobs live in the area. So I don't know if there's any data on that, but a couple people asked that.
I'll check with Arlene. I think we do have some demographics on that.
Hi, this is Tripty. So I had spoke to, I'm aware of Crooked's Dave actually leaving. They're a manufacturing and they don't own the building, but I don't know if that's the reason. Actually, the owner told me that the issue is, they're a distributor as well as manufacturing, and that the taxes for them are so high, they're planning on leaving, so I think they're there for another year, but their intention is to leave. And, I spoke to the Denver Bookbinding owner, Gail, before she passed, and she indicated that taxes are the reason, that her business too, and she owns the property, but taxes are the reason that, if they had to move, that would be the reason. So even, and, to your point, Bill, yeah, I agree. At least, if you own the building, the value goes up. But if you're trying to pay, based on your business, not, taking money out of equity, you would still be in the same situation of, can you afford to, do what you're doing, pay your employees based on the margins that you're getting. So this is definitely an issue. And, was there a conversation about this? I know this has come up a couple of times. Was there a conversation at the last industrial group or any ones with the Department of Economic Development? Like, how can we help, keep jobs?
Yeah, fortunately, we did have Joanne from Dito at the meeting, and she was actually able to kind of work with some of the business owners that wanted to reach out and have resources, and she presented on that, and we're able to connect offline after the meeting on that. But yeah, I think Dito has programs, and I think we can include additional policies to, think about additional programs and policies that help, smaller business owners in the area that are going through these things. I think the specific program she talked about was, I don't know specifics, but they offer to pay for some of the taxes based on, how many jobs you're providing to kind of the local areas and such. So there's a kind of a metric you'll have to meet, but they do provide some relief through Dito. And we're continuing to work with Dito to understand, what additional programs and thinking about long-term, opportunities are there to be able to provide additional relief. So,
what was her name?
Joanne. I'm forgetting her last name right now already, but
okay, I'll email you. I'll just get that because it'd be great to invite her to a neighborhood meeting and invite the businesses. So,
Yeah.
I mean, specifically with this versus like, hey, we're talking about vision, maybe we get more folks to participate if they know we're there trying to provide them assistance.
Yeah, she was at the meeting, and then she was at the public roundtables as well, but decided to give her a night off.
Thank you.
Yeah, Bill and Emily, we haven't heard from you yet regarding this. So.
Oh, I was gonna bring up something else. So Bill, if you were gonna address some of like the tax or specific what Tripti was saying, go for it.
No, all I was going to do is add a technical point, because it has occurred to me that people may not understand why it's important that you own the business. So when you lease a building in a commercial environment, generally speaking, you're having a triple net lease. And that's a wonderful instrument for the landowner, because they get to pass on all their expenses. So as you know, in 6 years, our property taxes have tripled. And not from a small number. They started as a big number, and they're an even bigger number. But I pay them. The business owner doesn't. So they gain all the appreciation, whereas their tenant is paying all the taxes. And Tripti's correct. Owning the business does not fully insulate you. If you don't have a business that is profitable or that has good margin, you know, the building ownership isn't fully going to insulate you, but it does become a prerequisite.
Sorry, I'm laughing. The Colorado tax code and how it functions just always ceases to like amaze me. Being a New Yorker, I'm originally from New York. I haven't lived there in a long time, but like the amount of tax people pay there is astounding. And granted, there's a lot of benefits and things that are built in that support that, but like sometimes I lose my mind over how inflexible and challenging our tax laws. So that's why I laughed. But the thing I was going to say, a little bit shifting gears, was I think one thing we talked about earlier was how to connect the community and industrial a little bit. And I see there's a sign on I-70 kind of right by Pecos that has like there's manufacturing there or something. They have like all those cool shapes outside that you can kind of see from I-70. And they talk about apprenticeships. So I work in education. I'm going to be working at CEC in the fall, and they have there's a huge need for apprenticeships. The governor is signing into law an expansion of apprenticeship programs. We have schools in our community that are training students in technical careers. CEC has tons of like pre-apprenticeship programs for students. So I think one way to engage the community and this industrial is to try to focus on not every business is going to be able to provide apprenticeships, but like what apprenticeships can we have there? Yeah, North's Engagement Center, Councilwoman Sandoval said, I think that there's a real opportunity to expand the connection between what schools are doing in this area and what this industrial park is doing. I don't know if they exist yet. I haven't explored that, but I think that's a huge opportunity that we should try to capitalize on, because if we want these businesses to stay, we want people that live here to work there, starting from when you're young, I think is a good way to do that.
And I had one comment, Emily, because I actually that's a sheet metal labor union, and it is a training facility and apprentice. I've actually talked to folks over there. Actually, an individual lives in Highland, West Highland. He actually retired. However, we had this conversation, and one of his job was to bring in more apprenticeships. So we were talking about how to get him in front of people. And one of the challenges he faced was with schools, with high schools, right? Because this is taking, high school grads into this. Some of these end up being very high paying jobs, a few years down the road. The challenge he was facing was that the schools, maybe this is changing a bit now, but the schools focus so heavily on going to college that he never can get ahead in making the pitch for an alternative. But yeah, I agree. Like, how could we?
In in a post-COVID world, I work in college access.
Yeah.
In post-COVID, nobody wants to go to college anymore. Everyone wants a job that can get them, every kid, every 18-year-old wants a job that can get them money right now where they can start work. Not every, but a majority. And especially if you look at the populations of students. So I used to work at Kennedy and now I'll work at CEC. Populations of the students at North, traditionally low income. This is a really good route for them because college seems so out of the realm of possibility, and so many Gen Zers are loan averse or debt averse. So yeah, I mean, literally I work for a scholarship foundation that, you know, college access is our job, but we're all pivoting to supporting the route of technical programs, certificate degrees, all those types of things. And DPS has, we actually hosted a union, Mike, sorry, you look so excited. We hosted like a union, an apprenticeship and trade fair, and DPS has connections with most unions in the Denver metro area and invited a bunch. It's just, if anyone knows how to engage 17-year-olds, you will make the most money of your entire life because it is almost impossible. But yeah, no, Trip D, it's definitely changing. And I could see that happening pre-COVID, but post-COVID, kids are, and parents and families are supporting that idea too. Not, again, not all, but a lot more.
Great insight. Thank you.
Mike.
Hey there, guys. I'm sorry, I'm very animated. But I think some of you may know I work for College Invest, which is the state's 529 college savings program. And we just sent out a press release yesterday. I'm sorry, I know kind of we veered far off topic on this now, but yesterday we sent out a press release that the governor just signed a bill that allows apprenticeships as a qualified expense for 529 savings accounts. So it's a huge deal for us. I know we have college in our name, but College Invest accounts can be used for trade schools and 2 years community colleges. And it's been a huge development for us, but the apprenticeship piece is a big, big piece to us now. So thank you for letting me just put that little plug in, but I can send you guys the information on it, but it's a huge change that the legislature and the governor just signed. So just music to my ears. Thank you so much for that.
Yeah, and Mike, I don't think this is off topic. I mean, in the context of this industrial area, right? We're talking about jobs, workforce training, and you know, this is good timing because we're starting to have these internal meetings with our partner agencies, and so this is all really good input. Like we haven't really talked and dived into this much in the public roundtables as much. So this is all really great.
So I know I've spoken a lot, but I've got one more thing I really think needs to be emphasized here, and that is that the whole question of a community center in one of your first charts, really the biggest single issue impacting that area is going to be whether or not this 47th Street Bridge is multimodal or not. And we haven't talked about it at all. So I just want to make sure it gets brought up. And just so everybody realizes also that it's a little bit of a hot potato within the Sunnyside neighborhood, because there is two contingents, and they both have valid points that they're making. Some want the bridge to have cars on it, and some do not. And so that's going to be a very interesting thing that happens here relatively quickly over the next few months, determining whether or not that becomes a multimodal bridge or not. So stay tuned on that.
I think they are close to making that decision, because my understanding was 30 days from June 1st, when they sent them the report, a feasibility study, and the city had 30 days to make a decision. And I'm pretty sure, my sense is they had already made it anyway, that this was where they were going. So thanks for bringing that up, Bill, because I think the issue is, if we're developing more pedestrian, we've got the bike, the bike lane at 46, and we want to have more pedestrian friendly things. What does a bridge, a car bridge do to that sense of an area that you're trying to build this connectivity, more people? That would be the question. Besides traffic on Pecos and the impact to the neighborhood because of additional traffic going north-south on Pecos and such. Thank you, Bill.
Yeah, no, that's great. Yeah, and in addition to that, I think it's, if we do keep somewhat, if we do keep the industrial, and obviously, there are impacts in transportation, kind of impacts tied to them, right? Like warehousing and distribution types of uses. So we do definitely have to dig into and understand what freight kind of patterns and kind of connections look like in the context of creating a more pedestrian friendly area. So I think this next phase of the process as we think about alternatives will be really important to consider.
Are there examples in other cities of places that industrial has like integrated well, or then places where it's not? I said I'm from New York. I know where it's not worked. The entirety of Brooklyn was industrial for a long time, and now the Domino Sugar Factory is a park and there's a water slide. Do you know of those things? Could we look at those? Could that inform some of the decisions that we make to see where, you didn't lose jobs, you didn't lose industry, it didn't get pushed?
Yeah, we're doing a lot of case study research right now, and fortunately we have more help in our department. So we have some staff members doing some additional research on this very topic, and trying to understand what other peer cities are doing. I think preliminarily, I think Portland was dealing with this in their Pearl district, kind of a similar situation about industrial, but transitioning over. But I trying to understand what's the mix and how do you make that work. So we'll know more in this next few months based on the research we're doing right now.
Sung, I want to ask just a real kind of loaded question. I think I know the answer on this one, but the hard thing on these industrial districts is once they get hot, man, they just get hot. And you got no better example than Rhino in Denver. Is it a fair assumption we don't want Rhino West here? that we want something more organic, and we want something that preserves jobs, the heritage, industrial, all of that. Great comments tonight. And it's really timely because Sung and I are going to be meeting actually with Dito next week. So the timing couldn't be better, but yeah. You're all nodding your heads. I mean, we don't need Rhino West because that's kind of where the market takes these districts. If there's no vision and if there's no guidance in a plan like this. So I think we have a huge opportunity here. I'm actually pretty excited about it.
Well, any other thoughts before maybe I go to my last slide about closing and next steps?
I think it's difficult to, as much as we don't want Rhino West over here, I think it's hard to compare the two because of the railroad tracks. So you have Larimer that runs through that technically quote unquote the Rhino Art District ran through. That created, and you have Broadway. So it started along Broadway and ran down Larimer. And I know because Noah and I were working in the council office when it was created. So we don't have that. We don't have that street that has that two-way dedicated traffic. We have Inca, and it's really, really hard, as I've seen on Central Street, to have one-sided in like an industrial area where it's only one-sided and it's not both across the street. And so as much as I don't want that to happen over here, I just don't think it can, because Pecos doesn't have the ability. We have that whole school along Pecos. We don't have like that thoroughfare that could create that type of realm in here. And that's where it's so important to have these conversations about the bridge over 47th, because we have been so isolated from the global neighborhood because of that. What does that look like if people can easily get there more easily? So that's just what I think about in my brain, because I think about Central Street as a missed opportunity. And I think sometimes Inca Street is a missed opportunity. I'm like, what is wrong with those streets? And all city planners will tell me it's because it doesn't have two sides like Tennyson. It doesn't have two sides like, well, it doesn't have two sides like 32nd. It's hard when you only have one side that you can build on.
And I would also just jump on and say that I understand what you mean, that you don't want Rhino West, but there's some good parts about Rhino, and let's grab those as much as we discard the bad ones.
Okay, last call.
Time to wrap up.
Okay, great. Thanks, Rebecca. Rebecca has great dinner plans. So let's see. Let me just share my screen again, and we'll go to the last slide, and we'll wrap it up there. Oh crap, I didn't share yet. Great. So you guys can see that. So closing and next steps. Better Block Jefferson actually got rescheduled to July. I don't know if 22nd is the right date, but I can look online, Leslie, or you can tell me now.
Yes, it is. July 22nd. Please join us. Los Mococheres.
So
We'll buy you a drink. We all need one.
I will be there tabling as well. So I will be there as a pop-up event. July 26th. I did reserve the Aslan Rec Center, their community center, for an in-person meeting for our July meeting. So I know that was the preference to kind of switch on and off. So we'll plan to host that in person, and then potentially have an optional meet and greet before the meeting if folks are interested. If you are, just raise your hand, use the raise hand function. And if we have maybe more than 5 people, I'll try to organize something for us.
I volunteer to flip burgers, and I'll bring Denver Beer Company beer.
Wow, really? Okay, well, Bill, we'll figure something out then. So yeah, I see. Oh, we need more hands than that if we're gonna have drinks and food, guys. Okay, great.
And then August 13th, my office is hosting a movie in the park at Zunai Park off of 51st and Zunai. Title of movie is TBD. Devin's my master in coordinating all of that. And there'll be a Skyline Music Festival at that park as well. So if you want to put that on your calendar.
What was that? What was that date again?
It's Saturday, August 13th. It's part of Denver has Denver Days.
Rats.
Yeah. So, but hopefully there'll be some more Denver Days at the beginning, but that's just one thing that my office usually does for that neighborhood.
Saturday, August 13th. Okay, I'll note that.
Wait, and add one more. That Saturday, August 20th, our next party under the viaduct in Sun Valley. I realize it is mere yards from this plan, but on the south side of the Broncos Stadium, we'll have another party under the viaduct in Sun Valley with partners, Sun Valley Kitchen, Denver Streets Partnership, and the West Denver Renaissance folks. So at 8:20.
Okay, great.
Since we're announcing this, let's see here. Sorry, since we're announcing stuff, La Raza Park Day this year is the 4th year, and it'll be on the 21st of August. So
where is that, Ben? Where do they meet?
La Raza Park. La Raza Park Day, yeah.
Does it travel down Federal?
This year, because we've had so much, and the planning committee, we've decided to ask everyone to cruise afterwards, because we've had to shut down 2 parks, and the logistics for doing 2 park permits and just all of getting everybody to and from the parks has been really hard. And it's caused a lot of, traffic and whatnot. So we're in the preliminary stages right now of getting the streets on Osage, Navajo, and 39th shut down so lowriders can outline the outer rim of the park and stop competing to arrive early to get parking spaces. And then afterward is when we're encouraging everybody to go and cruise and with family and have fun. So
Right on. Well,
And
I've
then
got, yeah, all the
yeah.
restaurants on Federal are excited and ready. So thank you.
Yeah, and feel free as those events come up, do send them to our team. Because August, we do want to just do some pop-up meetings to make sure people are engaged and preparing for our fall engagement. So just let me know, continue to let me know. And then Bill, I'll coordinate with you on our meet and greet. I'll do some RSVPs to see how many people we might expect. And then the last major announcement was just, again, the homework assignment is we're planning to get the engagement summary in the first week of July. So just be on the lookout for that. I'll send it to you guys personally as well, in addition to the e-blast. Read that. And the next few July and August will be just kind of workshopping recommendations before we take them out into the community. So yeah, so I will spell this out in the email and send it to you guys like we always do. All right, well, thank you guys, and have a good rest of your evening.
Thanks, Sung. Night, everybody.
Thank you.